Hey all, Johnny Mullet here. This is part 2 of the Skoolie maintenance and repair series. So what we're doing here today is I'm going to show you how to change the oil, lubricate, and service your Skoolie. This particular Skoolie is a international chassis with the T444E engine. Very popular engine for the school bus conversions. Or not conversions, but school buses in general, also known as a 7.3 liter power stroke. So the first thing you do when you want to service your bus is, as the engine is warm and running, you want to check your transmission fluid. And you want to check that with the engine running in neutral with the parking brake set. Make sure the fluid is clean, make sure it is full. And then you want to come on over to the other side and you want to remove your oil cap. And after you remove your oil cap, we are going to go ahead and drain the engine oil now. Okay, so I already loosened the plug. This particular engine takes a 19 millimeter or even a 3/4 inch wrench to pull the drain plug out. You're going to want to have like a 5-gallon bucket, because this particular engine takes anywhere from 16 to 20 quarts of oil. So the plug comes out and the oil drains into your bucket. And then on back, which I already did, so never mind the mess, I'm doing a repair here, but your oil filter would come off right there. So I already have the oil filter off, and I already have the engine oil draining. Now, as this is draining, I am going to move on to do other services on the bus. While your engine oil is draining, the next part of the service would replace the fuel filter. Now this fuel filter just has a lid that you put a 1/2 inch square drive in and you unwind it. I'm not changing the fuel filter right now because I already did it. The new fuel filter, just like on a previous video, will look just like that. So basically, you remove the old fuel filter, and then right here is a drain. You push the drain this way to drain the bowl. Flush some new diesel fuel through the bowl to clean out any sediment. Close your drain. Fill the filter housing up with fuel like I showed you in the fuel system freeze up. And then put your new filter in and keep pouring fuel into the bowl until it is full. And then go ahead and tighten it down. That will complete the fuel filter service. The air filter, you can pretty much look right in the hole and see if it's dirty. This one here has been replaced, but if I was to replace it, there's a clamp right here. You simply remove this bolt and this clamp comes apart. This big lid comes off and the air filter comes right out. You also want to check your coolant. You want to check, make sure that is full. And then on the other side here, you want to check your power steering reservoir. It's just a dipstick, so easy peasy. So you check all your fluid levels. If you have hydraulic brakes like I do, make sure the brake fluid's full, and basically a general fluid check. Now we're going to move on to greasing the chassis. There are a lot of grease fittings on any kind of heavy equipment. And you have grease fittings that need grease, and you need to do this at least every oil change, which should be every 10,000 miles on these particular type of engines. So there's a grease fitting inside the steering shaft, and you add grease to it, and you can see the grease coming out of the U-joints. There's also another grease fitting right here on the steering box. Add a little grease to that. And you will also find grease fittings down here on all of your steering components and on your kingpins. I'm going to go ahead and grease one over here on this side and show you real quick. We'll get my light down here so we can see what's going on. And right here you can see a grease fitting. It's actually buried in grease. Let me get that cleaned out. There's a grease fitting in there. And down below there's another grease fitting on the bottom. There's also grease fittings on the tie rod ends. Let's go underneath and show you. So you can see underneath the bus, there's the upper kingpin I showed you. There's a grease fitting right there for the lower kingpin. There's also a grease fitting on the tie rod end. So you have upper and lower kingpin grease fittings. You have a tie rod grease fitting. On the driver's side, you have the same thing. A tie rod grease fitting, upper and lower kingpin. And you also have the steering connection. This is called the pitman arm. And there's also grease fittings on that. And the most important part is underneath the vehicle. Now, underneath the vehicle, you will see the drive shaft. The drive shaft connects the transmission all the way back to the rear of the bus. There are universal joints that need lubrication. You can see the grease fitting right there. You put your grease gun on there. I'm actually using an air gun, so I'm kind of cheating. And you add grease, you can see the grease coming out of the caps. You can see that that U-joint is actually serviced. Farther back, you will find another universal joint right there. And there's also a slip yoke. Right here, you will see the slip yoke. What this does is it allows the drive shaft to, this part here will actually move in and out as the axle in the vehicle moves around. So there's a grease fitting right up top, right there, and this U-joint, and then the rear U-joint. So you want to make sure that you grease all those fittings. On the rear suspension, on the springs, you can also see another grease fitting right there. So the lubrication points on a hydraulic brake bus is usually all about the same. You're going to have all of your steering components and rear suspension on the front of the springs, and of course your drive line. Now if you have an air brake vehicle, there's a lot more involved. At the very back of the vehicle, this is the rear differential, your rear axle. There is a fill and inspection plug right here. You need to pull this out and make sure the oil level is right there. As you can see, I have oil level with the plug to make sure your rear differential is full of oil, and then you are good to go. And the last part of the service would of course be adding your engine oil. Look up your manufacturer, see what kind of oil your engine calls for, usually 15W40 diesel spec oil. This particular engine takes about 20 quarts. And then you need to check your air pressure in your tires. You just check and make sure all your tires are aired up to spec, and that pretty much finishes the service on your Skoolie. So if you do this routinely every 10,000 miles, this will prevent, problems down the road. It's called preventive maintenance for a reason. Thank you all for watching. Keep in touch. We're going to keep doing this series.